big hello to our parents in Asia. Welcome to the first of our Everything Boarding School video series. Everything Boarding School is a community outreach effort to bring the good news of boarding education to all corners of Asia. I'm your host, Daniel Sito. I'm an education consultant and founder and head of Sesameed Education. We're conducting our interview today from Singapore. And the topic is how American boarding education prepares a teenager for life beyond just university. We are very honored to have with us Mr. Peter Curran, head of school at Blair Academy in the United States.
Thanks so much, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here with you, with your team at Sesameed. As you said, my name is Peter Curran. I'm the head of Blair Academy, which is a boarding school in Northwest New Jersey, about an hour from New York City. We have 475 students from all over the world and all over the US.
So as a start, what is a boarding school anyway? How does it work? What is life at a boarding school like?
It's a wonderful place. It's an amazing community for students. It's a place where kids both learn and live. It's a little bit of a microcosm of the world that I feel most students will enter, not just after university, but during and for life. It's where people can connect from all different walks of life. I often joke with students, Daniel, when I pick them up at the airport. Blair's close to Newark Airport and JFK and LaGuardia, and I drive them to campus and they're driving up our front hill. I say, welcome home. Because for many, this is how they attribute home to. They're spending the majority of their year here. They're making lifelong friendships here. They're getting to know adults, always professional, but on a personal level, outside of just the classroom. You know, I say, I don't own a home. This is where I spend holidays with my family. My parents come and visit. This is where I've raised my kids. I've been at Blair for 13 years and I've been the head for 3. Students come to my house for dinner. Tomorrow night, I'm having the whole football team over for an ice cream social at 9:00 at night. It's important that kids get to know us as adults on many different levels. We wear many hats here. It's one of the best parts about boarding school, that we're not just teacher, but we're coach, we're dorm parent. We take them on weekend trips. We drive them to the hospital if there's an emergency in the middle of the night. Again, always professional, but we form these really tight bonds with one another. And it's a pretty incredible place. When I hire new faculty for Blair, Daniel, I always say that this isn't a job, it's a lifestyle. And you have to really want to embrace that lifestyle. I'll get into more specifics for sure, but in a general sense, it's an incredible living and learning community with very small classes, with incredible after-school opportunities from robotics to theater to athletics to arts. Robust weekend activities. And it's a place where, as I started off saying, kids really call home.
Thank you. And, boarding schools, in my humble opinion, is so special because part of it is because of the word boarding. Everything hinges on that word boarding. So in your mind, in your view, how do boarding schools fundamentally differ from day schools? I mean, what is the big deal about boarding, and how does boarding, generate developmental benefits to the teenagers, living with peers?
You hit it on the head with the word boarding. The biggest difference is at a day school, at some point, everybody goes home, right? The students go home, the teachers go home, the head of school goes home. Whether that's at 3:00 after classes, at 6:00 after activities, at 9:00 after whatever evening thing happens, but everybody goes home. That's different at a boarding school. As I said earlier, this is my home. This is all of our homes. So we don't go anywhere. Every evening we have adults on duty in the dorm. You live with a roommate. So much of what we do is in-person connection. It's forming relationships. And that is a key that I will say over and over again that I think will make kids most successful for not just college, but life. The ability to form relationships with a whole range of people. You live in dorms with, we call them at Blair prefects, big brothers and sisters who are seniors who will work alongside you. I sometimes will give the example to a student who doesn't quite understand the concept of boarding school. I'll say to them, have you ever seen your teacher in the grocery store? And they'll be like, maybe like once. And I'll be like, yeah. Did you go run up to your teacher and be like, hey, Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so in like the milk aisle? And they'll be like, no, I sort of thought it was awkward. And I went the other way. And I was like, yeah, I know. It's weird to think that teachers actually buy groceries and that they shop. And then I explained to students that at a boarding school, the teachers, we're the ones taking you to the grocery store. And yeah, you're going down the aisle and we're buying cookie dough and all this stuff. And then you're coming to my house and we're making chocolate chip cookies together. And then we're hanging out. And that's the relationship. Again, as I said before, you have your English teacher, but your English teacher may also be your basketball coach, may also be somebody who on Tuesday nights does dorm duty in your dorm. Maybe your advisor. Maybe it's the person who's taking you to the Asian market for weekends to get food or whatever it may be. So those connections run deep. A statistic that I share often is that for adolescents, the most important people who are influences in your life are your peer group and adults who aren't your parents. I'm a parent. And it's hard for me to sort of always understand that. But if you think about first your peer group, it's called peer norming, this concept of who do you surround yourself with? Who are the peers that you spend the most amount of time with? And I can say to you that this community that we have is unbelievably safe, but it's so vibrant. And I'm really proud of the peer group that students meet. And again, this is a very diverse peer group, which I think is really representative of the world that they will inhabit later because they're such interconnected with. And then the second group is adults who aren't your parents. These are the influences in your life. These are the role models. And it might be somebody who's 25, who's a recent college graduate. It could be somebody who is 65, who's taught at Blair for 40 years. But that diversity of adults in your life is so, so important. There are so many mentors and role models here. Adolescence, ages 14 to 18, it's when your brain is really most malleable. It's when you're able to form, I think, the essence of who you are. It's where you develop skills like self-advocacy, self-confidence, self-awareness, all of those really critical skills. Do we teach phenomenal physics and chemistry and calculus? Absolutely. But do we teach all of these other critical skills that will make you successful in the future? Absolutely. In fact, because of the way we're organized, because we're a boarding school, those skills, it's all about repetitions. Students practice those over and over. Public speaking and communication, learning how to live with somebody, time management. I'll go on about this, but those are critical differences that I think just because of the nature that we're a 24-hour learning community is very different.
Thank you. Talking about 24-hour, 24/7, that type of a community. I'll be curious to learn more about how's pastoral care and mentorship at boarding schools like.
Relationship building, it's the core of Blair. It's really the basis of everything we do. Twice a week, we have family style dinner. Okay. Kids sit with adults. They're not allowed to have their phones. They sit with kids that they don't necessarily know. And we have conversations. We talk. That is just one small example of this concept that I think you're talking about, pastoral care, which we take very seriously. These foundational skills of building relationships start at the very beginning. It's learning how to have a roommate and navigate. Okay, you go to bed early. I go to bed late. You're brushing your teeth next to people, and boy, do you get to build relationships. You have somebody walking the dormitories at night at a certain time saying, lights out, good night. Again, as I talked about the many hats you wear, I always say that students get to see me as the head of school, Yep. And that's important. And I'm I'm sort of a casual guy at times, that. But they see me as a father, right? When I'm hanging out with my own kids. They see me as a husband when I'm walking campus with my wife and our dog. They see me as a teacher because I teach a sophomore leadership class. I try to get out and play. I say the way I love to connect with kids is go out to practices, and I'll suit up for soccer practice. So they get to laugh at me as I try to keep up with them on the soccer pitch. So they get to know us on so many levels that there's a comfort level. And what that translates in the classroom is I might be teaching them English, and they might catch me or send me an email before class like, Mr. Curran, I was really stressed last night. I didn't get a chance to finish my homework. I apologize. Can I meet with you after class? Right? So we have this relationship where they feel a comfort level in sharing these things and advocating for themselves in a way, because they know, yeah, I'll get that. I'll understand that. And then we'll set up a time and I'll say like, great, maybe, let's meet for breakfast tomorrow and we'll go over what you didn't understand. Or why don't you come over to my house? We'll have dinner and catch up. I share with students that boarding school, it's far more than a 4-year experience. I think a lot of kids, when they think about and they're applying, they're like, okay, this is where I'm going to go for high school. This is where I'll go for 4 years or 3 years or whatever. It's a relationship for life. And that might be a little wild to think about, but the relationships that we have with kids after Blair, I was in North Carolina last Thursday. We had 60 different people at a reception, and we had an alum from the class of 52 there to somebody who's in 8th grade who will be starting at Blair next week, and everybody in between. And it was incredible hearing their stories. We had 2 Blair faculty members get married on campus. They're both Blair grads. I taught one of them English, and the other one, when I was the dean of admission, she was the first person I admitted. They run a sophomore boys dorm. They got married right in front of my house. And what was really special, Daniel, is I married them. They asked me to, I jokingly say, I did it all online. But, true pastoral care, the head of school, you do wear many hats. And one of the hats is I marry faculty members. But that's what I'm talking about. That's the commitment to this place. That's when we really talk about this home idea. We had our first group of athletes come back to campus yesterday for preseason. And as I addressed all the parents as my first address for the school year, I talked to them about health and safety is the biggest priority, right? Absolutely at the top. When my wife and I go to bed, we say we have our 2 kids and we have 475 other kids that we're responsible for. And if there's ever a concern that parents have, we want them to always feel free to pick up the phone and call us. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, this concept of parent partnerships. That's also part of this pastoral care, as is teaching them all sorts of skills. Right? It's not just, like I said, the self-advocacy and self-respect. It's learning how to look somebody in the eye when you're having a conversation. It's knowing when to put these devices away. And we actually have a pretty strict cell phone policy. You can't have cell phones out when you're walking the pathways. You can't have cell phones at lunch. You can't have cell phones in community meetings, because you know why? We want you to focus. We want you to talk to the person sitting next to you. In classrooms, you have to put your cell phone in a holder because we want you present. So all of these skills are taught in addition to, like I said, critical thinking and learning how to analyze literature and learning, statistics.
Thank you, Peter. You earlier you mentioned about health and safety, and health in particular, mental health especially rings a bell. To me, especially in the post-COVID days. Nowadays, teenagers everywhere, boarding or not, they face tremendous pressure, peer pressure, pressure towards colleges, universities alike. And how do teachers at boarding schools help teenagers cope with these type of struggles and maybe even setbacks?
There's this concept that we talk about at Blair called accountability with care. And what that means, Daniel, is we need to hold adolescents accountable. We need to be the adults, right? We need to give them boundaries to operate in, but we need to do it in a caring way. We need to do it in a supportive way. That's really important. Secondly, we actually talk about failure pretty openly at Blair. And I always say we want kids to fail forward, right? You're not doing anybody a service if they never fail, if they never learn what a challenge is, if they never learn what a struggle is, right? But what I'll say about Blair is, and boarding schools in general, is we try to create these parameters, this safe environment where you can put yourself out there and you may struggle, you may fail, but we're helping you pick yourself up. And that's a muscle that you start exercising, right? It's the same muscle as learning a new language. It's practice. You need to practice developing resilience. So if you never have a setback, you're never going to practice it. Or if the setback is so big that you don't have the supports to help build you up, it's going to be really crushing. So what we do here is we encourage students to take risks. If you're comfortable in your environment, if you feel safe, if you feel cared for, you're going to take some really smart risks. And when you do, unbelievable things happen. Maybe you might fail forward, or maybe you'll learn, hey, I really love Spanish, or I had no idea that robotics was a passion, and here I go. And it sets you off on this path. But we want kids to grapple with some difficult things in this safe and supportive environment so that when they get to college, they know how to do it. They know how to navigate it. In life, they're like, oh yeah, I've done that. I can deal with this. I know how to handle that. I know what resources exist. It's really important.
What role should parents, especially international parents, expect to play after they have sent their children to boarding schools?
As a parent, and we all know this, you might interact with your son or daughter and you just sense something on the phone. Like you hear something in their voice that just feels a little off. And I always say, when you hear that, call us. Don't hesitate. Now that's Blair's philosophy, right? Long gone are the days, Daniel, where it's like, okay, we drive up the gates, you drop us off for boarding school, and we'll see you at winter holiday. I mean, you know that from having your own children go to boarding school, and that is so important. And we at Blair, from the head of school on down, we want to partner. We're not going to call you about every little thing. We don't expect you to call us about every little thing. And I always joke with new parents, Daniel, and I say that there's this time in the fall usually, and it's called the phone call dump is what I call it. And what it goes like is this, your son or daughter, new to the school, first couple weeks, calls you and is just in an awful mood because maybe in soccer practice they missed a pass or missed a goal, and they didn't do well on their biology quiz. And then they were in the dining hall and their friends sort of looked at them funny and they were feeling a little off or insecure about it. And so they call you and they're like, what did you think of sending me here? I can't believe it. Why this place? And then they hang up the phone. And you're on the other end, halfway around the world being like, oh my goodness, what do I do? Right? And that's the dump. That's the phone call dump. They feel great because they're just dumped all this on mom and dad. They let all their emotions out, and then they're down the hall hanging out with their buddies or doing whatever, and everything is fine. I always say to families, like, when you get that, because you will, reach out to us, check in with us. Now, there are some families who say, you know what, part of why I want to go to boarding school is to sort of relinquish some of that. And that's fine too. We will check in with parents often. If they communicate with us, great. If they are sort of not communicative as much, that's okay too. We will still proactively reach out.
Now, I understand, Blair has a very unique and very powerful and effective dual advisor system. Would you like to share the little bit about the secret sauce over there? How does it work?
Yeah, it's pretty, and this has been in play far before I got to Blair. And I've had the great fortune, I should have shared. I've worked at quite a few different schools. I've worked at schools in Europe, international and American schools. I've worked at schools on the West Coast, in the Rocky Mountains of the US, and certainly on the New England in the East. So every student at Blair has 2 advisors. They have an academic advisor who changes every year. And that person really talks with them about their schedules and their classes and finds the balance between pushing but not too much and, hey, checking in. And then students, uniquely enough, get to choose their own advisor. Again, what's the most important relationship at the school? It's with a student and a trusted adult, right? And so who better to choose than having the students instead of, most schools, it's just sort of a random pairing, or maybe it's not random, but it is the school pairs the students. At Blair, we really give the students, and they have about a month to figure it out when they're new, the option to choose. And then the cool thing is, Daniel, Blair students can actually change advisors. So they might meet after their 9th grade year, they might say, you know what? I need a different advisor because my needs are different. Or I thought Mr. Curran would be great. He's really not. And I want to choose this person, my basketball coach. But then we help students have a conversation with their advisor to say, hey, I'm moving in a different direction for this reason or that. So again, those are life skills to learn. And it's a really, really important.
Thank you. I would like to move on and ask a different set of questions, as in suitability. Are all boarding schools the same? I mean, obviously not, right? But how do they really differ? And how do parents learn more about boarding schools and choose among so many of them for their child, in terms of suitability match?
Yeah, no, thanks so much for asking. And I sometimes will share there's a little bit, and pardon the expression, of like an art and a science to this process, right? The science is like the research and data that you can do. And you can do most of that online. We've really invested in websites, especially since COVID. So you can get a lot of data about a school online. And then sometimes there are these quantifiable things that just need to happen, right? You want to be within a 90-minute radius of an international airport. One of the things I say to Blair when I am in Asia is, yes, we're far away, but it is, a direct flight for most major hubs between Newark and JFK. And then it's a 90-minute ride or a 60-minute ride. So whatever those, maybe you say, I want to go to a big school and it has to be 800 or above. I want to go to a small school. You can figure those all out. Every school is different. I always say the 3 questions you should ask everybody when you go through the process is the size of the school and why. You always want to figure out the why. Why are you 800 students? Why are you 475? Why are you this? Do you have Saturday classes? And the third question is, what's your boarding day ratio? I think that's really important. Every school is a little different there. So you got to figure those out. But then the art, Daniel, that's the fit. That's the culture. That's the community. And that's something you can tease out from websites. I always say, look for repeating words or themes on websites. If you spend your time on a website, you should have a pretty good idea of what handful of values the school stands for just by seeing repetition of language. I joke sometimes, adolescents, all of us, we binge watch shows sometimes. I say, binge research a school. Like spend a couple hours and do a deep dive on Blair and then be like, okay, then spend a couple hours the next day or a couple days, do a deep dive on the next school. So you really can get to know it. But the art is the feel. And I really think the best way to figure that out is to visit. That's hard to visit campuses, especially when you're halfway around the world. Other ways to do that is there's fairs, right? I know there's going to be one that you do in Singapore and Bangkok, but you can meet people from the school who can share more, tell stories. There's receptions that we hold. Blair will be, we go to Asia 2 to 3 times a year. And so we'll have a school-specific reception, and it'll be great because we'll have families, perspective, current, parents, alums, and they'll be able to tell stories, and they'll be able to share and answer questions. Those receptions are really helpful. We do webinars every Wednesday night. So every Wednesday we have our Dean of Admission, Teddy Wenner, does Wednesdays with Wenner, but it's a great way to connect and to learn a little bit more. Again, since COVID, we've learned how we can do a lot virtually, but nothing if you can visit. Nothing replicates visiting a campus. I always say when you get out of the car, there's a feel. When you walk around a campus, you want to look at the expressions on students' faces. Do they look happy? Do they look stressed? Again, how did I start? This is your home, right? It's where you learn, but it's your home. And you have to decide what type of environment do you want to live in. And many students, and certainly not all, but they'll get help from other resources. Educational consultants can be really helpful. I mean, our relationship started, 13 years ago, right? With you and I connecting. And, there's a lot of really intelligent people who know a lot about schools. And I think, part of the joy we've had working together, it's connecting really passionate individuals like yourself who are educators with kids, and then putting them together to find schools. And kids and schools. And so it's really a matchmaking process. It's all about fit, right? I mean, I'll tell kids, if you love Blair, great. Let's look at 5 other schools similar to Blair or different, just so you can get a feel. At the end of the day, as sort of funny as it sounds, you're a consumer, right? And this is a product, and you want to be really thoughtful about how you decide if it's the best for you.
Thank you, Peter. When you use the word product, if I were to look at Blair Academy as a product, the very first word that came to my mind is the word happy. Over my past 22 years of traveling among boarding schools, everywhere. I've been to the States, Canada, UK, Switzerland, continental Europe, Middle East, everywhere. I cannot easily find another school that I can come up with, top of my head, that is happier than the faces that I encounter at Blair. And it's not just one time, it's every single time I go to Blair.
I think in today's world, there's a lot of pressures that we have on ourselves. And in order to be most successful in this hyper-competitive world, you have to have a starting place where you're joyful, where you find purpose. One of the themes, I'll let you know, the themes that I'm going to talk about this year at Convocation is about joyful purpose, which is different from joyless urgency. And I'm going to, yeah, I know. A lot of us live our lives with joyless urgency, right? It's the to-do list. It's getting through things and you're just checking off the boxes. But are you really enjoying what you're doing? One thing I did want to mention before we close was just why and how we prepare students for college on that way. There was a Harvard professor by the name of Richard Light, and he interviewed, I think, 10,000 undergraduates about what made them most successful. And some of the things that he learned was about learning outside the classroom in a residential setting. Boarding schools do that. Students learn better when they're encouraged by faculty to collaborate with one another. We do that. Collaboration is key. That's what we do in the evenings. That's what we're doing with kids. Small classes. Students learn better in small classes. Boarding schools have small classes, 12, 11, 10 students. Diversity within the classroom, right? Diversity of opinion. One of the things that we teach here is learning how to have a conversation with somebody who has a vastly different point of view than you do. The last one, which is huge, I think, is just time management skills. There was a stat that I read that said 70% of the jobs that 9th graders today will have when they graduate from college, their first jobs haven't yet been created, right? So if you think 8 years from now, if 70% of the jobs haven't been created yet or invented yet, how are we preparing them for that world? AI is going to be doing a lot. But again, what I've talked about, self-awareness, knowing your own skills, communication skills across lines of difference, self-advocacy. And then one big one is empathy. AI systems lack emotional intelligence. Boarding school environments, we do all of that every day. It's not like we have a class for it. It's just how we live. It's family style dinner. It's Saturday night hanging out in the dorm with whatever teacher, or it's having a roommate and you guys have a disagreement about music and you have to navigate that. I feel very passionately about it. And again, that's one of the reasons why I've devoted my life to this.
Thank you so much, Peter, for your most precious sharing with us today. Now, we encourage all parents to follow Peter on social media and also to check out Blair Academy, definitely.
Thanks so much, Daniel. Take care.
To all parent viewers out there, if you like what you have learned today and would like to learn more from Peter, please remember to click the like button. Share the video with your family members, with your friends, and more importantly, subscribe to our channel to stay connected to all the other videos we will be publishing. Thank you all for watching. And until next time, happy boarding school hunting.